You're listening to DruidCast episode 168. Hello my friends and welcome to DruidCast episode 168. I am your host Dave the Bard, and DruidCast is brought to you on or around the 20th of every month by the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. If you want to find out more about the Order and our courses, including our new online version of the Bardic Grade course, you can do that right over there at our website at www.druidry.org. Now, it wasn't long ago I mentioned on the show that the reason I tend to play mostly acoustic music is that I'm not sent in that much rock music, but how that has changed over the last couple of months. It seems you rockers have been busy releasing some excellent music and are taking the time to send some in to me for the show. And we have two great examples of rock music this month. The first is the song you just heard, and it gives me a perfect time to practice my Latin, which is Animula Vagula by Age of Fable. Yeah, I didn't do Latin. The poem that the song is based on was originally written in Icelandic by an Icelandic poet, and the title Animula Vagula is based on the words from a well-known Roman emperor that many of you know, a certain Hadrian, who was also known for his excellent masonry and brickwork skills. He wrote the words before his death as a message to his soul in transition, and there is a link to an article about that in the show notes. A great song, and thank you for sending it in. The other rock song, well, that will be later on in the show. The talky bit this month is an interview by Philip Cargom with River Jones. River is the creator and mentor for the Order's School of Celebrancy online courses. If we look at the development of the Druid community, celebrancy is a growing area that a lot of people are interested in, and this interview goes deep into that practice and profession, and it also dispels a few myths. So grab that cuppa, chill out and enjoy the interview. Here is Philip Cargom in conversation with River Jones.
The Talky Bit.
So, River, here I am with River Jones, and River is just up the road in Brighton. I'm in Lewes in Sussex, in the Sussex Downs, and River's in Brighton, just a short way away. And we're recording this in the beginning of March 2021. And the focus of this discussion that we're going to have is around celebrancy. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to ask River about how she got into it, why it's a subject that she's passionate about, and then let's hear about the course in celebrancy, the School of Celebrancy that River runs in conjunction with OBOD, and then any plans for the future. So River, it's lovely to have you here. Tell me, why celebrancy? Of all the things in the world that you could be doing, why has celebrancy got hold of you?
Well, I feel as though it was just my destiny to get into celebrancy. You know, now I just feel that I'm very, very fortunate to be doing what I really love for my living, and it's something that just, to me, feels as though it kind of brings together all of the things that I love doing, and all of, in a way, all of the gifts that I feel that I've been given. So I guess it starts probably, you know, if I think about it, quite early on, with being quite interested in ceremony and ritual. I mean, I grew up, you know, like a lot of people did, you know, in a Christian society, and I actually got taken along to Sunday school and things like that as a child.
Was your childhood very religious, or was it just sort of nominally Christian?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't kind of a very religious, like, we weren't like a churchy family as such, but we did go to church on Sundays. You know, it was in the 1960s, you know, where people kind of did. And I was taught to say my prayers at night, you know, God bless Mummy and God bless Daddy and all my brothers and sisters and that sort of thing. And then my mum died when I was 5. And then I think after that, it took on a different role in my life, because then, you know, there wasn't any more family involvement. But a good friend of mine, you know, when I was about 7, was a Catholic, and they used to go to church every week. And I went with her one time. And then my dad found out that I'd been, you know, to the Catholic church. I said, "Oh, what are you doing going there? If you want to go to church, you have to go to the Protestant church." This is all in the army camp where we lived. Oh, right. So I started going to this sort of army church on a Sunday morning, which is quite a strange experience, because the vast majority of the congregation are squaddies, you know, that have to go there. And the minister's actually a superior officer, so sometimes he would sort of, you know, tell them off for not singing the hymns with enough gusto. And the Welsh Guards congregation, he'd say, "I've heard you on the rugby terraces," and so this. And then there was somebody that did a kind of a Bible class club for kids, you know, on the army camp. And I think for me it was some kind of feeling of connection with my mum, because, you know, what I'd been fed the sort of usual narrative of, you know, she's gone to heaven to be with God. So, you know, the closest I could get to her is kind of go to God's
via
house.
the service.
Yeah. So, and then my stepmom ended up working for some people that were Christian Scientists. So they offered to take me to their Sunday school. So then I got this sort of completely different perspective for a few years. Then I went to secondary school, joined the Christian Union, because we had this wonderful RE teacher. She was called Miss Brownrigg. She had taught everyone's mums. And she was one of these kind of extraordinary women with a bosom the size of a bus. She used to put on the Christian Union one at lunchtime and one after school. And she made the most amazing flapjack and homemade fudge, and so she, you know, brought everyone to
lure you in with that.
And through that, I ended up going on a kind of little, you know, out of school retreat thing, and then met this sort of evangelical Christian minister from the church in my neighbourhood. So I went through all these sort of different forms of it, you know, in my youth, and then came to university and started studying, you know, the Bible in English literature as a sort of text, and something. Hang on a minute, this isn't, you know, we can't take all this as, you know,
as gospel.
It's a cultural product, actually. And so I was a bit sort of, you know, at sea for a while after that. And then, you know, got into yoga and learnt meditation in my 20s. Then there was for me, right through all of this, I also always had this, you know, deep attraction to the natural world. I spent lots of time off in the woods on my own as a young child. And, you know, I think I was a sort of tree hugger from as long as I can remember. You know, I would just climb trees and sit up trees for hours on end on my own, you know, as a child. And, you know, or always sort of really treasured those sort of moments of, the kind of magical moments that you get being alone.
How did you come to Druidry?
I went off on a kind of literal adventure, travelling to Australia when I was 30 with my young son Will, who was then just turning 7. The main impetus of which was that I had this sort of great longing to be in deep nature, having lived pretty much all my life here in the southeast of England, where you're always within hearing of a major road somewhere, sodium glare in the sky at night, you know, and I wanted to kind of get somewhere where I would be, you know, really away from all that. And I did have, you know, amazing magical adventures in this huge forests in southwest Australia, and then just came back with this, you know, real curiosity then about earth-based spiritualities, and started investigating that through a number of different means. But I think it may have been that one of Ronald's series, he's done a few over the years, hasn't he, about different forms of paganism in the UK, might have been aired around that time. Does that sound right to you? Around 96, 97? Anyway, I saw something. There was I think it was Ronald. There was a programme on probably BBC Two, back when there were 4 channels, showing different forms of, you know, pagan spirituality, and the one about Druids was, okay, I really like that bunch. They sound good to me. And I'd also started a women's group doing full moon ceremonies. That's a sort of slightly other story, but I was basically gifted a ceremony that comes from another tradition, and started doing that with a group of women in Brighton after I came back from Australia. And it was actually through that that I got into celebrancy, really, because we as a group went through a time where we offered some open ceremonies, open celebrations for the cross-quarter festivals, and we did a big gathering up on the side of Ditchling Beacon, actually. This is probably in 98 or 99, and I think about sort of 80 people turned up to this, and afterwards a couple approached me and said, "Oh, we really like the way you held that ceremony. We're getting married. Will you do a hand fasting ceremony for us?" And
so
I
the first time you did a rite of passage.
Yeah, I didn't even know what a hand fasting ceremony was, and I was quite bowled over to be asked, but I said, "Well, I've got no experience of this, but if you would really like me to do it, I'd be really honoured to do that." And so just went through a process with them of trying to find out what they wanted, and created this ceremony with them and for them. And that's now my sort of strap line, on my on back of my business cards it says unique ceremonies created with you, for you.
Right.
But yeah, I then did the next one that I did was for an old friend of mine who then knew that I'd done this one wedding. She's, "Well, I'm going to get married. Well, I'm going to do a ceremony in my back garden." This is in a little terraced house in Bristol. But her and her husband are not in the least bit, they're the sort of people that, no, we're not spiritual, we're not anything, we're just humanist. And so it was very much, again, about working out what it meant for them and what would feel right for them. So I had a sort of handful of these under my belt, and through alongside working at the University of Sussex, where I was involved in community outreach programs and project management.
So you were teaching. You were teaching in.
Yeah, I taught creative writing, and I ran a number of programs that were aimed at sort of bridging the gap between the university and the wider local communities. And so that was my main job. And celebrancy, running, I did the odd ceremony on the side. And then after, probably when I got sort of 4 or 5, I think after I'd done my first funeral.
Yes.
And that actually came up whilst I was doing Ivan's course, Ivan Macbeth. He ran his shamanic healing course that we did a year course, and met with him for a weekend, and it came up during that course, and it felt really that for me, that course with Ivan felt like a real affirmation that this was my path
on your path.
Yeah.
Of course, since then you've done lots of funerals, haven't you?
Yeah.
How many funerals do you think?
I think it's a while since I counted, but I'm pretty sure that it's over 200 now.
Over 200.
Because I know it was it was over 100 when we started School of Celebrancy 5 years ago. So it must be, So that was 99, my very first hand fasting ceremony. And then by the sort of, mid to probably 2004, did the course with Ivan. From then on, I was thinking, dare I take that leap from my secure job at the University of Sussex, into celebrants.
You became a professional celebrant around
2012.
2012.
2012 was when I became, when I went full time, left the university and went full time into that, yeah. And so my real passion from that time was really about making ceremony available for everybody, and that everybody should be able to access at those really important moments in their lives ceremony and ritual that feels real and natural and meaningful and grounded just in a language and in a form that feels comfortable and right for them, you know, not coming through anybody else's lens.
Not a template that is just being delivered.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a kind of template in a kind of, you know, what makes a structure of a good ceremony, of course. But that the actual, form of the ceremony should be really created with and for people. So that's been my passion, and most of my funeral work has been through working with local funeral directors. So the kinds of people that I do funerals for really are from all sorts of different backgrounds and walks of life.
And how does it work in terms of the ratio of funerals to weddings that you do? Do you do more weddings than funerals, or more funerals?
For me, I do a lot more funerals than weddings, because funerals is all year round. You know, weddings tend to be a kind of summertime thing. And also, you know, how you get work as a celebrant, you know, as a funeral celebrant, a lot of it is about, if you want to be in regular work, then it is about making relationships with funeral directors who then, you know, refer clients to you. You become one of their sort of stock of celebrants, you know, alongside their priests, you know, of different faiths, and, you know, that they may refer families to. Whereas for the other kinds of ceremonies, it's much more, you know, certainly these days with celebrancy becoming more and more popular, you need to, you know, have a business and sort of be marketing yourself online. You know, there's a certain amount you'll get from word of mouth, but so, you know, the most weddings that I've done in a year, I think, is 14, whereas funerals I've probably done 60 in a year, you know. So
60 funerals in a year and say 14 weddings, something like that. Yes, exactly. And so let's talk. So let's talk about the School of Celebrancy, because I think now we'll have to refresh each other's memories here. But I think it was in about 2014, so that was 7 years ago.
Yeah,
that we had been talking, and we came up with this idea of having a long weekend for members of the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids to explore celebrancy. And I think at that time we were visioning it as just as a one-off. I don't think we had any plans for a School of Celebrancy, did we?
No, definitely not. No.
We didn't.
So, yeah, I remember getting the email from you saying that you were offering this celebrants retreat.
Yeah.
And I remember my sort of thoughts and feelings as soon as I saw this was, oh, great, because when I went into celebrancy as my full-time occupation, I did do some training with an organisation called the Fellowship of Professional Celebrants here in the UK, and it was like spiritual. The S word was kind of forbidden almost, you know. It's just, you're the spokesperson for that family, and it was something that we couldn't go into. And so to be able to, the opportunity to reflect on celebrancy, you know, within the OBOD context, you know, and as a service to spirit, you know, that was something that, oh yes, I'm so delighted to have the opportunity to do that. And then you asked me and a couple of other people who were working more in the field to come and talk about the kinds of training that we'd done, because I think there were about 40 people.
That's right. It was a fantastic weekend, wasn't it? And we were in Earth Spirit near Glastonbury in Compton Dundon, and it was just a fantastic few days. And I invited two Christian priests along, Peter Owen Jones and Mark Townsend. And I wanted them not only to hear their stories, and because they're great and they're very interesting and very open-minded and so on, but also I wanted them to explain to people how I think most people who aren't the celebrants, who aren't in this world at all, think that priests have had this incredible training in celebrancy and how to do it. And I wanted them to explain what sort of training they got. And Peter Owen Jones told this story of how they get very little training. I mean, that's the bottom line. They get very little training. So that somebody who trains in celebrancy through either our school of celebrancy or some other celebrancy training really doesn't have to feel inferior in any way. Like those guys are the professionals, and we're just trying to play catch up. It's not that at all. It's actually the reverse. That somebody who trains, say, in the school of celebrancy, one could argue might well have a more thorough training than a priest, which is an extraordinary thing.
It really is, isn't it? And actually, one of the first discussion threads in the course, I call it the good, the bad and the ugly, just invite people to have a sort of reflection on their best and worst experiences of ceremony. And there are so many people who cite both weddings and funerals. The worst ones are almost always the religious one, where it felt, and people say things, it felt like it was just going through the motions.
Yeah.
It's nothing about my grandma, it was all about this, or it all seemed to be about an opportunity to convert people, to the faith, or to, tell people they were going to, might go to hell, whatever it was, So, there's there are some fantastic and wonderful ministers of religion out there, and actually we've had quite a few ministers of religion on the School of Celebrancy courses as well. Interestingly,
have you? I didn't know that. How incredible! So just so that listeners and viewers can get a picture. So what happened is it was such a great weekend, and we did, and there just happened to be a couple from Mexico, members of the order, who just recently got married. And they agreed to have another wedding ceremony in the garden and for us to film it. And JJ officiated at that, and you and others helped. And we did a sort of director's cut of it, didn't we? We've got a commentary over the top of it, so that people, and that's in part of the training as well. And so it was a great weekend. And at some point after that, the idea of actually, people said, shouldn't there be a training in this? We want more than just a weekend, I think.
Well, people actually said it at the weekend, didn't we? When we had we had the final session, which was the, which you always have at those things, how did this go? What did you, but as I recall it, people were really almost sort of demanding it, and saying, we've heard about this training, and why can't we have an OBOD training?
And I remember resisting it. I remember saying, no, we don't need to do that. But actually, it grew, and then we started the School of Celebrancy, and you put together these fantastic courses. First, it was the funeral one, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then a little bit later,
tell
us a bit about that.
I just want to say a little bit more about how that came apart, and how where the resistance was from you, and because I remember we had this sort of discussion about an idea that had come up in the past was the idea of sort of ordination, within OBOD, so people would become or ordained celebrants, as it were, and we were having a chat about it, you and I, and because of myself coming from this sort of adult education background, I said, well, it could be more in terms of a professional development training and not so much of an ordination. So,
that was the shift. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. So that has been the approach to it, really. So so I developed the first course that I'd say we developed, because everything went past you, and we were very much working together on them. But the Serving the Living and the Dead, which is the course for funerals, and then we piloted that in 2015. And as we were just saying, when we tried to do that as an online webinar in 2015, it was horribly clunky, and the technology
wasn't great,
not up to scratch, was it? And so
but it was a live group, which meant that there was that, and then what we developed over the next sort of year or so was actually making film. We filmed you giving talks, and we put the lesson material in sort of content that people could receive and download and so on wherever they were in the world. And how many people have taken the courses?
Okay, so we've had we've had a total of I think it's getting on for about 300 people that actually signed up for the courses. Obviously all the ones that we ran as face-to-face webinars, everyone completed them. What we have now in that they're up and people can complete them at their own pace is that you know, sometimes life gets in the way, you know, or some people I think just decide to now just sign up for the course and just do the course, and they're not too bothered about having to do the homework and get the certificate and things. Because
that's right, because about 100 people have graduated.
About 100 people have actually graduated. To graduate, they need to complete now. There are 6 assignments for each course, and we have one platform where people access all of the lessons, and they include, as you say, film materials, written materials, some exercises for people to do, you know, during their session, guided meditations with you. There's that talk from Peter Owen Jones at the original gathering is part of the course. And then we have another platform where people can interact together as students. We have discussion threads, and where they also interact with me. So every student gets one-to-one feedback on their homework assignments, and they need to complete all of those in order to get our lovely School of Celebrancy certificates.
Yes, that's right. So they get a certificate in the end, and that's actually a high proportion. If there have been 300 students and a third of them, 100, have got their certificates, that means that's a high level of completions. As you say, there are some people, because I think people will come to these courses for 2 reasons. One is, you know, you're asked to lead a funeral or a wedding. Friends, relatives turn to you. They know perhaps you're in this world of spirituality and so on, and you want to have a grounding in it. That's one sort of reason, I think, why people take the courses. The other reason is that it really does call to you as something that you may like to do more widely, maybe even make it your profession. And what's lovely, I think, is it works either way. Obviously, in the first case, if you're being asked to put on a ceremony for a friend or relative, you're not necessarily going to do all the homework and get the certificate because you don't need to. But it may, you may grow into that. And of course, then there's a really interesting question here about which is the degree to which it is druidic. And the fact is, what I love about the courses and the way they've been developed is that they can be used, and the ceremonies that people are being taught to develop and create with the clients can suit any kind of client, can't they? I mean, you can. They don't have to be druids. They don't have to be pagans. They don't have to be spiritual at all.
Absolutely. So, I think when you were talking about the kind of people who want to take the course and the different people's different reasons they want to take it, absolutely, it does range from maybe that one person who the person who's been asked to lead a ceremony, or has been to a ceremony that wasn't right for their family, or did a reading or wrote the eulogy, at the funeral of a relative or something like that, and then thinks that I'd like to know more about this. And some people are just quite clear that they are interested in being a celebrant just for their own community, which might be their pagan community. So they know that they want to offer a particular kind of ceremony. But because our School of Celebrancy courses, these ones have been sort of designed, we were thinking primarily of offering these to the OBOD community. So we didn't need to cover anything that's already in the OBOD training. So there's very much the emphasis on the training has been how to deliver a professional service, for any ceremony. And when I say the service, I mean, from the first point of contact with whoever you're doing the ceremony for up to actually delivering the ceremony itself, and really going into all the kind of nuts and bolts of how to put together a ceremony and practicing some of the skills and arts of that. So the homework tasks are really designed to give people the actual experience of doing the kind of jobs that you need to do, to create.
Yes, ceremony. Because maybe I can say this, that if it ever happens to you that you are asked to lead a funeral, or to officiate, if that's the right word, a ceremony or whatever, I think my experience is what many people experience, is that there's an element of surprise, because it's very sad, so often, and somebody's died, but it's an incredible service. There's something incredibly deep and meaningful and important and valuable, and you feel like you're really contributing, and to be able to learn about it, to feel secure and confident in that, I think is really, really good. And I think at one level it is a vocation, in as much as if it's vocational, then in a sense you have no choice in it. You just know, there's no doubt, there's no question in your mind. This is what you're supposed to be doing. It's just clear. And I guess that happened with you, when and which is why you've done so many. Or it can be not necessarily vocational. I realized that I wasn't supposed to be a full-time celebrant. I just knew it. But when I do it, I feel completely in the flow, and I know it's absolutely the right thing to be doing. And that the support that people get in that course is fantastic, because they have all the sort of intellectual and practical knowledge. Because one of the practical things that people will ask about, is it legal? Can I do this legally?
Okay, so the legal side of things only really applies to weddings, because of course for all of the other types of ceremonies are kind of separate from the legal process anyway. So you don't the baptism or christening or naming has nothing to do with registering a birth. And a funeral, although the death has to be registered, it's an entirely separate
getting
process.
The death certificate is complete.
So anybody can deliver those ceremonies. The only question where there is where legality comes into it is if we're thinking about doing a legal wedding, and for that, our courses are open to people worldwide, right? So the legalities vary vastly from country to country, and say in the United States from state to state. So whether or not somebody is able to offer that legal officiation alongside delivering a ceremony for somebody, that's going to depend on where in the world you live and whether that's possible, and then perhaps whether you actually want to do that. Here in not the whole of the UK, things are slightly different in Scotland, but here in most of the UK, you cannot register as a person to become a legal celebrant. You have to either be a state registrar or a Church of England priest. And anybody else, even if you're another denomination, you're not a legal, you can't, and it has to be also a building that's registered for marriages here
So,
Yeah.
but in fact,
Yeah.
this isn't. There's an easy workaround for this, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is in whichever country you happen to be in, the couple just goes through whatever legal motions need to be done, and then you hold the ceremony exactly as you want it.
Yeah. Or a lot of our students in the States, it's quite a straightforward process for them to register.
Really?
Or they can get a permit, for each wedding to be the legal officiant. So it really does depend where you are. But I think wherever you are, certainly here in the UK, it's a massive sort of growth area. More and more people are choosing to separate the legal from the ceremonial aspects so that they can have that freedom of choice, to have their wedding outdoors in the woods, in their garden, on a beach,
exactly
the content they want. Yeah.
And I think one of the lovely things about these ceremonies and the training that goes with it is the fact that you can bring your artistry into it. You can be really creative with it, so that when somebody comes to you and says that they would like you to arrange a funeral or a wedding, you can really say, well, you can do whatever you like. Let's be as creative as possible. And there are certain constraints in terms of if it's a funeral, the amount of time you have at the crematorium or whatever. But even that, you don't have to be restrained by, because you can do stuff outside of that time in a different place, and so on and so on. So you can be really creative in terms of the music, the different elements in it. There've been a couple of funerals that I've been a celebrant for, Peter and Belinda in Brighton, where they've been extraordinary events which have happened outside and inside the crematorium, with lots of unique elements in it.
And even in serving families who, as I said before, my passion is really about being able to offer this for anybody. And when you're working with a funeral director, you need to be prepared to serve anybody that they send to you. And to be honest, probably the majority of my clients I quickly discovered, get a bit nervous if you start suggesting things to outside the familiarity, a lot of the ceremonies I deliver do end up still being within a fairly kind of safe and familiar format. But even within that, there's so much that you can bring and to really personalize that ceremony and to make it, to give it the sort of honor and depth that is due.
It's needed.
Yeah.
And tell me, what about plans for the future? Because I know you've got plans for the future. At the moment, we have two courses. We have Serving the Living and the Dead, which is involved in working with funerals, and then we've got the family. What's the other one called?
Celebrating Life.
Celebrating Life, which is about weddings and namings, really, isn't it?
Yeah, weddings, namings, also sort of vow renewals, and we have a bit of a discussion about divorce healing ceremonies and things like that. So we've got two new courses in the pipeline. Well, first thing to say is that I'm currently in the process of sprucing up both of those courses.
Right.
So just bringing everything up to date, and adding in some of the things that we've learned, over this 5 years. I've got to put some extra instructions for all of the homework tasks, bit built up, and I'm also going to start some bring back some face-to-face webinars, with the new courses as well. So we're going to have
that's great. And also, I guess it's important to mention that when you graduate, you can put this on your, in OBOD, if you're a member of the order, we've got the celebrants directory. And we know that people use that because we get calls at the office for people saying, I'm looking for a celebrant in this part of the world.
So yeah, so we've got those existing courses that are being spruced up, and the new courses, there are two that are in the pipeline. One is, I haven't, not quite sure what the title of it is yet, but it might be Celebrating Community. So about community celebrancy. So by that I mean, okay, so it's become more recognised now that there's this alternative to a religious ceremony for hatchings, matchings, and dispatchings, as we say, you know, births, deaths, marriages. But what about all of those other events that where, you know, it might have been your parish priest or your local imam or whoever it is, you know, that comes along to open a village fete or to celebrate harvest festival or, you know, other kinds of community events. Also, what about the group rites of passage, you know, coming of age, for coming of age at adulthood or elderhood, and other kinds of ceremonies that happen, you know, out in the community, you know, like, for example, I have been for the past few years running an autumn memorial, which isn't a funeral for one person, it's just a space for people to, you know, be able to gather together
to remember their loved ones who passed on.
Yeah. So one course that's going to be very much about community celebrancy, and that also can involve, you know, for bodies, you know, be doing community celebrations of the festivals, you know, the 8
festivals as well. And I love the vision when you said about opening the village fete. For those of you who aren't in England, there's this sort of very traditional English thing of the village fete where you buy scones and play tombola and on the lawn of the village and all that. And the vicar opens the fete, doesn't he? We'll know that there's been a sea change in the culture here when instead of the vicar opening the fete, it'll be the local druid opening the village fete.
Yeah, or the local celebrant. Yes. So yeah, that's one of the courses, and then the other course is more about looking outwards now from OBOD. So you know, there's a growing community of celebrants worldwide that have done other kinds of training, or indeed no training, or, you know, as we've said, all the celebrants in the kind of religious world that may not have received a great training on the actual art of celebrancy. But yeah, this other course is, its working title at the moment is Celebrating Earth, and that is a grounding in authentic nature-inspired ceremony, you know, for celebrants.
Great.
So we're going to be launching that later in the spring, summer, and that's going to be a space for what I want to offer is exactly what I said, you know, I was really excited about getting when I got that first invitation from you to that first celebrants gathering is, okay, let's actually come at this and really explore how it relates to our spirituality, our relationship to the world. You know, there may be celebrants who are a bit, you know, we might call it Druid curious or nature curious or pagan curious, or whatever, who want to sort of find out a little bit more about, you know, what is this sort of extra magic that I think we in the Druid world, you know, can bring to our ceremonies, or we, you know, that we do invite. Yeah,
exactly, because there are two groups of people that are growing in numbers, and celebrants need to sort of cater for those. One is the spiritual but not religious category, where, you know, you're asked to do a funeral or a wedding for people who are spiritual but they're not religious. They don't belong to a particular church or religion. And that SBNR category, as it's called in religious studies, is growing bigger in the States, United States. The SBNR category is growing really large. And then within that, you've got the earth-centered, nature-based spirituality category, which is growing as well. And to be able to address and work with people who want that approach is really important.
Yeah. And I've worked with a lot of people. Like I said, my second ever wedding, they didn't identify as spiritual at all, but they definitely are, earth lovers. And I think there's a lot of people who really don't like the S word, probably myself included to a degree.
Right.
But that do nonetheless, feel that there's something very precious and very special about their relationship with the natural world, that they want to, somehow kind of anchor their ceremony, the important moments in their life into that. Yeah. And then, of course, weddings wise, you often get as well this situation where you've got two partners who are from different backgrounds and maybe have completely different takes on this. So, it's really important as a wedding celebrant, actually, to be able to kind of walk between those worlds and really listen to people.
Really listen to them and see whether they want them woven together. I think you've done some, and I know I've done one of weaving Hindu tradition and Druid tradition together in one ceremony. And yeah, beautiful. Well, fantastic. I think, River, that's I'm so glad that we've been able to talk about this. It's a subject that we could talk about a great deal more, but for now, let's finish here at this point. Is there anything before we finish? There's something you want to say?
Yes, there is something I want to say, which is that we're going to be beginning the School of Celebrancy live broadcasts from the School of Celebrancy Facebook page. And I should say that these live broadcasts, you don't actually have to have a Facebook account to access them. And those are going to take place on a Tuesday evening at 8 o'clock. And I'm going to do the first one on Tuesday, the 23rd of March. And it's going to be on the subject of retirement ceremonies.
Right, retirement ceremonies. Lovely. And is that once a month?
I'm going to do it once a month, yeah. So it will be on the, I guess, be on the fourth Tuesday of every month. Right.
Okay. Lovely. I'll really look forward to watching that. Good. Well, thank you so much, River. It's been lovely talking to you.
This earth is our home, our salvation and protection. We should give it praise and care and fulfill our obligation. This earth is not ours to plunder and abuse. All the creatures of the earth should run free as they choose. We are part of the one with the deer and the trees, the birds of the air with the badger and the bees with the water in the stream and the shore surrounding the sea, with the hillside and the moor and the green mossy
Well, that was a fabulous interview with River there, and I know that a lot of you are interested in Celebrancy, and the courses of the School of Celebrancy that are run by the Order are open to members and non-members alike. So if you'd like to learn more, do check out the website at schoolofcelebrancy.com. There is also a slight change to the plan from what River said in the interview. To keep it simple, School of Celebrancy live broadcasts will be on the last Tuesday of every month. So the first one will be at 8 p.m. on Tuesday the 30th of March on the theme of Retrieving the Art of Blessing. River will be joined by Adam Harley, who will be giving a blessing for spring. And to find out more about upcoming topics, visit the School of Celebrancy Facebook page, which is at facebook.com/Druid Celebrant. Or if you don't have a Facebook account, you can access a mailing list to access these broadcasts by emailing River at celebrant@hotmail.co.uk. After the interview, you heard a track from the new album The Rite of Spring, an epic concept album by Davey Dodds, and what a journey he has had recording that under lockdown, I should imagine. The result, though, is a proper concept album that has a real old school folk feel about it that takes me right back to Pentangle and some of those bands from the early 70s. Absolutely love it. Well done, Davey. Great result, great album. Early on, I mentioned the increase in rock submissions to the show, and next up, that continues. A listener to the show sent me a link to a YouTube video that Matt Farkas, the guitarist from the band Master Sword, who was doing a live listen and critique of my song Sabbath. Now, it was such fun to watch, and I'm glad to report that he liked the song. Well, I got in touch with him and I thanked him for the video, and I also had a listen to his band, who are great. One of the things I love about them, and all of you Nintendo gamers out there will love this too, is that their music is based around the video game The Legend of Zelda. I mean, how cool is that? Anyway, I asked Matt if I could play a song on the show, and he said yes. So here is Master Sword playing the title track from their latest album, The Final Door. Thank you, Donington. Well, my friends, that music means we are approaching the end of the show. But before I go, let's have the results of last month's competition. The prize was a copy of The Mythic Moons of Avalon, a book written by last month's guest, Jenna Tellendrew. And the question I asked was, during the interview we talked about the goddess Blodaev, who was turned into a bird by the magic of Gwydion. What type of bird was it? Well, the answer was an owl, and the first name drawn from the hat and winner of that fabulous book is Steve Halber from California. Congratulations, Steve. That book will be with you as soon as all of our postal services allow. The prize this month is a hardback copy of a novel by Christopher Gorman called Rise of the Guardians, a fabulous eco-magical story set in 2103 as a wizard is born to help aid Mother Nature herself. A brilliant read. So what do you need to do to have a chance to win that book? Simples! All you need to do is answer this question. Earlier in the show, I played a song from the band Master Sword, and I mentioned that their songs are based on a famous Nintendo video game. What is the name of that video game? Earlier in the show, I played a song from the band Master Sword, and I mentioned that their songs are based on the famous Nintendo video game. What is the name of that video game? Well, email your answer along with your full postal address to podcast@druidry.org and one of you will win that book. Go on, have a go. Someone wins every week, so why shouldn't it be you? Go on, send it in. Another episode of DruidCast draws to a close. As the lockdown eases, it looks like I'll be able to venture out for a few more Walking the Talk interviews over the coming months, and I am very much looking forward to that. But this weekend in the Northern Hemisphere, we will be celebrating the spring equinox, and man, I am ready for the spring to arrive. But whether you are welcoming the spring here or the gates of autumn are opening for all of you listeners down under, I wish you all a wonderful equinox, my friends. I'll be back next month for episode 169, but until then, I wish you all peace and blessed be. Goodbye.